Okay, what's up everybody? My approach for this video will be similar to all the other approaches in this series. I will look at the movie as a writer and judge it based on those techniques. And so I'm really focusing on like motives and story structure and all these other elements that come into play when writing a story. And with that being said, let's continue. Also, please comment down below about what you think about my comments or just the movie in general. I'm a very small channel, so it helps me a lot more than you think. And on top of that, it's something that I can actually engage with. Since I don't have that many comments, it's very easy for me to actually start a dialogue with you if you have anything to say. So let's begin. So one thing that I really loved about this movie specifically is how it created urgency. I love that so much. There's so many ways to do it, and I feel like a lot of stories kind of mess it up sometimes, where they just don't like just give me the action, give me what's happening, and just start the story, right? One piece of advice that's often given for urgency is to just, have some bad guy come in with a gun and just start shooting up the place, right? And the reason why that's kind of like, it's not really like the best advice. You shouldn't just, it could change the whole tone of your story, and that might not be the direction that you want to go. But it's hinting at a fundamental part of story structure, and that is make a problem present, like just have it be there. And Guardians of the Galaxy did this really, really well. Like the beginning of by the way, spoilers ahead, so get ready. Anyways, so the beginning of the movie starts off with this one character. I don't think he's really been introduced as far as I know. I'm not completely what's the word, that involved with the Marvel universe. Like I know a good amount of it, but I feel like I'm always missing something. But they introduced Adam Warlock, and he really comes in and just messes things up, right? Like he attacks everybody, but primarily it's very obvious that Rocket is his main target, and it's just a great way to start the movie, because it's like, oh wow, now we have to do something, right? And he puts it in a very critical state. I mean, throughout the movie, that's the whole movie, honestly, is Rocket is about to die, and we need to do something about it. And to further create urgency, they do this one thing it's pretty easy to do, but it's very important to do. And that is, I think it's often referred to as like a ticking time bomb kind of method. So you just very easy put a time frame. If this action is not done within this time frame, then there will be consequences, right? And in this case, if they don't, I think it's like some code or whatever that they need to get for Rocket and save his life. They need to make sure they do that within 48 hours or he is gone, right? That's the whole thing that drives the story, and it creates just so much urgency. Like they have to do something right away and make sure that they save their friend. Absolutely, just great storytelling. And that method, honestly, it just works, right? Like they use it in Titanic, they use it in what else? And they also use it in this other movie called In Time. Like it's just, it works, and I'm really glad to see that they use that technique very early on and just establish the stakes and just get the story going. Now, another part that I really liked was the origin story. So we don't know much about Rocket's background, and this movie offers that whole backstory, and it's well done, right? Like it is pretty amazing how they weave it into the story. Like I think because so many origin stories, they take up their own movie, and it feels always kind of unnecessary, where it's like, was all that information really needed? And this story is just very efficient, you know, like we understand what happened to Rocket, what bonds he had created with other people, where he was at, and even later just functions later, as in when he, you know, doesn't die and he actually comes back. It makes sense as to why he wants to kind of confront the High Evolutionary. In doing so, then they're able to not just give us a background, but actually continue the story from there, right? And yeah, I absolutely, I loved it. I really did. Really sad though, really heartbreaking, but that's a good thing, you know, like the fact that I was sad and like actually moved by it does show that they were able to pinpoint some very basic, like the fundamentals, right? They were working on the fundamentals, like let's establish a relationship with these people, and then so once they're gone, it really feels like we lost something. And yeah, it was really well done. I loved it so much. And really one thing that I appreciated, because I feel like it's kind of difficult to do, especially when there's so many characters, is to have just great motives. By this I mean you kind of want to make sense of everybody. Like everybody has to want to do a specific thing for a reason. Like they approach the goal in a certain way that correlates to the relationship that they have with each other or with whatever goal is in mind, and it's done really well. I mean, it's very basic, but it should be, right? Like just keep it simple. Like Star-Lord and the rest of his crew, for example, they just want Rocket back and they care about his bond, about the bond that they have with him. And in contrast, there's the High Evolutionary who, I mean, he cares about Rocket, but in a completely different way, in a very dark way, as like he just wants to know why Rocket was able to be so intelligent, smarter than High Evolutionary himself. And yeah, that creates a very different dynamic in that relationship, because the High Evolutionary does not care about Rocket. Obviously, like he is willing to get rid of him. He just wants his brain, right? While Star-Lord and the rest of the group, I mean, they actually care. They want to do something. They want to save Rocket because they love Rocket. Like that's just great writing. Like there's nothing too complex there. But at the same time, by having those motives conflict a little bit, well, that's gonna create tension, and it supports the whole movie. Really well done. I was really happy about it. But now, sadly, I have to talk about some of the things I didn't like, and this again relates to motives. One motive that I just didn't like was from Drax, only because it felt just odd. Like it really felt like a forced narrative thing. Like at one point, if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. All he's supposed to do is protect the ship, or just be at the ship, right, and be ready for to like fly out there when they need him or whatever, right? And he just decides not to do it. Like again, this is one of those things that happens a lot with like these comedic elements that play in these stories, where like the comedy is just I forget the word I used. I would say the comedy is privileged over good storytelling. In this instance, he's like, I don't do what people tell me to do, and it's like ha ha ha, and then he just like leaves. It's like, yeah, I guess that's kind of a funny line, but it was just weird. Like, why would he do that? Besides him saying that, like, but that's not really that convincing. It really felt like something was just like, if he wasn't there wouldn't be enough problems in the story, so he just kind of had to do it. It really was not the best writing that I've seen, and slightly let down, honestly, just because most of the film and everything felt great. Like I know at one point, to create conflict, there's that scene where Mantis, she that was pretty funny though. She accidentally threw away their suits or whatever, and then you see the suits like in the background or whatever, and they're like floating in space, and like, well, how are we gonna get out of this like whole predicament without the suits? But in the situation, it kind of makes sense. Like, she wasn't thinking about like all that stuff, right? Like, she didn't know that there was gonna be like that was like a garbage thing or whatever, right? Like a disposal thing. But in the case of Drax, it's like he knew, right? Like he just decided not to. Like, very odd, to be honest. And another kind of motive that I thought was really, really odd. Like I really was I was astonished by no one's reaction to it. At least when I was watching it, like no one was like, what? Was Star-Lord, right? There's a part where he's really contrasting himself with Gamora. Like, Gamora is unethical and she's like being very violent, and he's like, no, just, relax, just talk to them like human beings or whatever, right? With some decency. Well, I guess they're not human beings, aliens or whatever. But anyways, he talks to them with decency, and that's how he's getting around these problems, and it works, and it's kind of nice. And then in another moment, Jesus, like he grabs this guy from all the way up from like space kind of thing, grabs him and like pummels him to the ground and like basically kills him. And it's like the most brutal thing. And I don't understand why his persona kind of changed kind of out of nowhere. Like his motive of like, okay, yeah, his motive stays the same, but like of obviously, getting Rocket back, but the way he approached it was very different in that one scene, and I don't understand the inconsistency. Maybe no one really thought that was an inconsistency. No one seemed to react to it, but I really thought it was kind of an odd thing that he did. I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking too much about that. It just felt weird considering how ethical he was trying to be. Now, the last thing I have to talk is about the cliches. I have a whole thing written here, but I'm gonna go briefly about it. There's 3 things that I did not like. I'm like, there's just, it takes away from the moment, right? One, it's not your time yet. Like, what? Come on, like that's. It's so cheesy. It just feels awful. Yeah, that one really upset me. I'm like, come on. And then the second one is like, everyone deserves a second chance. Look, if you're going to, honest to God, if you're going to present some maxim, right? Like some like, ooh, this is how you should live your life, and this is like a value that matters or whatever, right? Then the story has to support it. And in this instance, yeah, sure, you could, but it doesn't feel like any part of the story was really talking about second chances. I mean, Gamora at most, but even then, that's kind of like based on how the whole story functions, like the whole like story world is operating. To call it that second chance feels like a stretch. Like, and plus we're talking about second chances like with her and like Star-Lord, right? That's not really like the same thing. Like she didn't do anything wrong, and then needs a second chance or whatever. But it felt forced. Like it just kind of like a nice thing to happen or whatever. If anything, there should have been tension between because this is said between, I think, Groot and the Warlock guy, right? There should be tension there, Like this guy was trying to kill them. There should be like more than, oh, you deserve a second chance. Like, if anything, I think a scene that could be used as a really good framework is from Avatar: The Last Airbender, right? There's at one point, God, I always forget their names. You know what's funny though? I always remember his nickname, which really upsets me, but I don't know why. It's just easier to remember. Zuzu, wherever, right? He comes back and like he wants to help them. He wants to help the Avatar and the whole gang and like, be a part of it. And Katara has a great like comeback. It's like, how the hell, how are we supposed to let you just be in the group? Like, there's no way. And yeah, that developed its own little plot, and it's just great because it actually reflects this complexity that's that the story deserves, right? And in this little moment, that's taken away. He's like, oh, you deserve a second chance. I'm like, okay, sure. And the other one that really bothered me was the whole, oh, I'm done running. I you know, like, I don't know. The thing is, cliches aren't bad just because they are uncreative. They are bad because they take away from the moment's uniqueness, you know? And that's exactly what happens here. Like, Rocket deserves, honestly, a better line. Like, by saying just that, by saying, I'm done running, does not capture the complexity of the experience that you had, like the emotions that you had, like the betrayal, the feeling of a lesser being. Like, there's just so much going on there, and that cliche line has nothing to offer it. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Overall, for me, it's a 8 out of 10. Really enjoyed it overall. I think it's one of the better Marvel movies, in my opinion. But yeah, that's all I have to say. Please comment down below. I love reading the comments. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.